why I chose documentary filmmaking is because this medium had allowed me to enter different people's lives. Every time I make a film, I stayed with that person for weeks or months or sometimes years. And those people's lives are so different from mine. Hooligan Sparrow, she's an activist, and I had never encountered an activist before. But by living with her and telling her story, I had basically experienced what she experienced, and in some way, I lived her life. And then in the second film, I filmed a homeless person, and I had lived on the streets with him for weeks. And in order to tell the story, I decided that I would just live his lifestyle and just live on the street and eat from the garbage can. And that way I had experienced that life too. And I think in the future, the more films I do and the different topics which I enjoy and different people, I would experience so many different lives. And that's the way that I feel I can expand my own time and life.
Mm-hmm.
Background information if you want to introduce your characters and your story at the very beginning. And if the person sitting next to you started by saying, hey, this is my first time being on a plane, or this is my last time being on a plane, you would be very, very curious and you want to know why. And because this is something so unusual, so surprising, and you've never heard of, and you have lots of questions. Why is it the first time? Why is it the last time? And that person starts by saying, well, because my mother came from Kenya, my dad came from China, and I've never been on a plane before or something, the backstory. And then if it's the first time or last time he's on the plane, and he started by saying, this morning I was so excited or I was so sad because this is the first time or last time. So I was making my breakfast, and I had this breakfast, and during the breakfast I was thinking about this, and all of a sudden the omelet, the glass of milk became relevant, and you would be patient to care about those information and those small details. So I think the opening is exactly the same. You have to think what is the most intriguing thing, and what can allow you to open it up, to have conflict, to introduce characters, and to introduce the setting. Like I said, you want to introduce your character, you want to introduce the filmmaker, you want to introduce the background. From here, you can see that when I first introduced her, I had only one picture. And I had to try so many different versions even before New Stock Film Festival. I had to put in more photos of her, and I said more in my voiceover. This voiceover was already too long. I said, this is her, and she did free sex campaign, and why she did it. And why she did it is really important to introduce her, because otherwise it's confusing why this person is offering sex for free. If you don't explain, everybody will be confused, which will distract them from continue watching your film. And so I had to try to put more photos and then try to explain her history of being an activist. I would say, this is when she did the free sex, this is when she used nude photos, this is when she first became famous. And then I would sometimes even say, in one version, would say, in 1970, in 1980. And then it became the kind of film that I hate myself. It's like using still photos and Ken Burns and then talking, which I hoped that my film wouldn't be like that. But I didn't have a different solution. So I decided to cut them all. But then the information became insufficient, and the voiceover became too long to try to fit in that one picture. So that has always been a problem for me.
You taught yourself that language.
You watch films, I watch.
Yeah.
It's not like I invented.
Right, no, but you
Yeah.
invented it for yourself.
Yeah.
You realized that works for me.
Yeah.
and it worked in that moment. And then suddenly you are beginning to develop the language for your film.
Mhm.
And then you've got this whole list of things that you need, and suddenly you realize, and probably you didn't realize it even on a conscious level,
Mhm.
right? But
Yeah.
you had seen it once. You'd seen the rewind,
Mhm.
and you saw the rewind work for you.
Mhm.
So that then she's able to rewind the whole summer, she's able to rewind the footage with the police, and she's able to say to us in a completely abstract way that this film deals with time.
Mhm.
This film deals with revisiting what you think you know.
Yeah.
It deals with how technology matters at this moment in history in China, right? That it's all about the camera. That if she doesn't have the camera, she's not powerful. If Hooligan Sparrow is not photographed, she cannot protest, right? So it gives you, so all of a sudden, look how much Nanfu got done in a very short period of time in the opening of her film. And you heard the list of what she needs to get done. Like, we're all exhausted. Like, how could you do that? But she found the language.
When I was thinking my plan A and plan B and plan C, and I think I have different criteria of choosing the topics. One, the subject I care about. Two, I think it's gonna be visual. You think if you are gonna film somebody at home, and they're never gonna go out of the home, then it's gonna be a challenge. It's not that it cannot be a film, but it's gonna be a challenging film to film, because that person is gonna do the same thing over and over and over, and visually it's just gonna be in that room. So you have to think what kind of story. If you don't have confidence that you can turn that into a very interesting film, then you have to select something that is more visual. That person is gonna travel from one place to another. And the third is there gonna be any kind of a development, any kind of a change? Is that person gonna go through a big surgery during the summer, or a graduation, or move from one place to another, or some kind of a life challenge? And she was like, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm here. And I said, can we meet tomorrow since we are both here? And she was a little bit surprised, but she said, okay, tomorrow, how about 7 o'clock? And I said, sure. We find a place, we'll meet near a subway stop at a coffee shop. And I wasn't in that city. I was, I think, 400 miles away. And then I took an overnight bus. I got there the next morning. I was very excited. I got ready. I went to the subway stop where we and she didn't show up. I waited for 2 hours. She didn't show up. I called, I texted her. She never responded. And then I went back, very disappointed. I found a place to stay in that city, so I went to the apartment, and I left a lot of phone calls, messages, and she didn't respond. The next morning, about 10 o'clock, she texted me back. She said, sorry, yesterday I was too busy, I couldn't make it. And that's it. And I started, again, making all my phone calls to the next film. And I was thinking, I'm going to buy a ticket and then go to where the next film is. at the same time, I was very curious because she is this public figure, and I told myself, I'm going to try to meet her once and then hear her explanation and to see what kind of person she is. And I trust my own instinct. If she doesn't feel like a responsible person, and I'm gonna just forget about this project. And I called her back and I said, hey, it's okay. Can you meet today, tomorrow? And she said, sure, at the same time, the same place. And I said, no, I'm not going to meet the same time. I don't want to wait at a coffee shop not knowing where to find you. So I said, would you please tell me which hotel you are staying at? If it's easier for you, I would go meet you at the hotel so you don't have to come up. And she said, sure. And she not knowing, very uncertain. And then I got to the lobby, I called her, she didn't pick up the phone, and I was like, God, what kind of, what scam is this? She's not picking up the phone, even at the hotel. So I went to the front desk, and I said, I'm looking for this person. I'm sure she stays here, and we have a meeting. And they reluctantly called her room, and then her roommate picked up the phone, and then tried to find her. And then a few minutes later, she ran from the stairs and came to me. I made a list. When I tried to find an opening, I made a list of scenes in the film, and which I think it was also a way that I usually try to structure the film. Is every scene is around 2 to 5 minutes, and when you are filming, you can do this too, which I found it really helpful for even editing or finding what the story is. Every time you film, you have 3 days, 5 days of footage. You make a list of the scenes, the moments that individually it can be a 2 to 5 minutes moment, and then you name it because the name is going to be the core of that scene, what it's about. Driving from one place to another, that's not. That's a transition. But if in one place somebody meets another person and then something happens, that's a scene. And I make this scene list. And I think for a very story-driven film, eventually, if it's 30 minutes, you should have 10 scenes or somewhere around that. How do I make it different, and how do I not repeat the end? I was selecting the moments that I think will be the most effective. If I can use only 2 lines or 3 lines from that scene, which do I use? Because I don't want to use 2 minutes, which eventually you will see them again. And so 2 or 3 lines, that's one thing which is easy to do. You select the most tension. And then, how can it be different? How can it be cinematic? Since this is a moment that eventually will come back to the film, and now I'm seeing it as sort of like my memory, and in our mind we process memory differently from reality. We remember things as fragments. We remember things in different speed. Sometimes it's a fast forward, sometimes it's slowed down, and that's my inspiration of how I'm gonna edit this. I'm gonna have 1 second of fast forward because that moment is not what I remembered, and what I remembered is exactly that split second when they did this to me, when they walked towards me. And I still don't know the solution. I think there are people probably do voiceover really well. And from my own experience, what helped me in the second film compelling to Hogan Sparrow was I say the things that I absolutely needed to say, and I say the things that I feel reflect on my emotion, not descriptive. Like I try, if I had to say something to describe the scene, then maybe it's not a good place for a voiceover. It means that you cannot show it with visuals, and you always force yourself to do that with audio and visual that is part of the film. And the things that I say in my voiceover, I try first show what I'm thinking, and because that's necessary to guide as I am in the film, how I feel about it, what I was thinking, and if necessary, really important that you did miss, but try to say in a very concise way. And I write the things that I absolutely needed. Like, you don't say voiceover for too long because it gets boring. Nobody wants to hear you talking for too long. And with Hooligans Barrel, it has a very clear arc. There is action, there is development, there is plot. Progression. She was, like I said, she went to the protest, she got arrested, she got evicted, and this happened, that happened. There is a clear events. But with this film, there is nothing. And some films do not have any development. And I met him 4 years ago, and now, 4 years later, nothing had changed. He's still him. 4 years ago, he lived on the streets. 4 years later, he still lives on the streets. There is nothing, no change in him. And if you have a film like that, it's difficult for you to create the arc, because a good film is about transformation, about a character change from one thing and then at the end of the film into the other, and you want to see the transformation. But then what do you do when they don't? And when I was making this film, I know there is no clear arc, nothing had changed. And how can I make a film? I cannot start with the same and end with the same. It's going to be boring, and the audience would feel so dissatisfied. And then I'm thinking, there must be some kind of a change. With anything, there is a change. Something, if it's not physical, if it's not tangible, then there are things that is intangible. My relationship with him changed. I started as a stranger to him. I got interested in him. I was fascinated by his story. And then after I learned his story, I hated him for, taking advantage of people as a homeless person, taking money and always drink. I became judgmental. And then I met his family, and I understand him. What produced him is the culture and the background and the family that produced him. And then I started feeling sympathized with him, not judgmental, but it's not about like or dislike this person, but more of understanding where he comes from. And then in the end, it's more of understanding. And we all have that as a filmmaker, or the person himself or herself would have some emotional arc. And if you don't have physical, tangible outside arc, you may find the emotional inner, arc. And then I decided, this is my arc of the film. I'm gonna manipulate and control the audience's emotion. scenes that you just love and you feel so proud and you know I did a great cut. But when your instinct tells you that, you trust it, you try to find out why you don't like it, why that doesn't work. And I think eventually you would find the answer, but oftentimes when I didn't know something if it's working or not, you ask people to watch it. I still have the stack of comments from Newstock, my classmates, when they were watching all the different cuts of A Hooligan Sparrow. Like everyone would give comments, and sometimes the comments seem so irrelevant. Some person would make a comment like, I don't remember that person, or like, I don't know why he's there. And something that you might feel, I have explained so clearly and everybody else got it. Why not that person? That person must be stupid. But sometimes they are not. It's just there is a problem. If somebody mentions something, and no matter how stupid that might sound or seem, it is a problem. And it might not be the same problem the other person was saying, was the comment about, but might be something that, that made that person make that comment. I don't know if it makes sense. If a person said, I don't understand point A, it might not be point A that's the problem. It might be what's before that, what's after that makes that point confusing. So if somebody says something and you disagree, I think you should write it down before you disagree, and then go back and then look at it, think about it, and why. Just to try to think why. I think there is no really dumb audience. And I have so many people say to me, we don't know you are Chinese, like in the film. And I said, what do you mean that you don't know? I look like Chinese, I speak like Chinese. Said to the other person that I'm from China. But they was like, no, we don't know. And then it must be because the idea of you being a Chinese is not clear enough, it's not strong enough, and that's not probably saying it 3 times, but find another way to bring that story point a little bit more. So I collect feedback from people, and I write them down and I put them in the same folder, and then I study them over and over and then look if there are 2 comments from 2 people are similar, and if so, what is the essence of that comment? And then once you identify the problem, I think finding the answer is relatively easier than not knowing what the problem is. He took me to his home, and I said, I brought the footage, would you want to watch it? And he said, sure. And then he started watching it on his computer. And I said, do you mind I film you watching it? And he said, no, go ahead. And I started filming, and then he started watching, and then he became very emotional halfway through the film. And then eventually he was crying, and then by the end of the film, he was sobbing, and he's like, thank you so much for making this. Like, I so appreciate it, you did it. And then he said, I always felt like I never understood my son, and I was never part of his life that way until I see this. And this is the first time I felt I understood him. I understood his choice, and I felt proud of him. And I feel that I'm proud of his life. I'm close to his daily life because he sees everything. And then after that kind of conversation, he opens up to me. He was like, yeah, as a detective, my life was really hard too. I investigated so many cases that traumatized me, that I see murders, that I see child sex crimes, And I oftentimes couldn't talk to anybody because these cases are either confidential before it's fully investigated, or it's just too problematic that I couldn't describe the details to people or to family. And he said, and I said, well, how do you deal with that then? And he said, well, I usually do video diaries. I would set up a camera before and after I go investigation, and I would talk to myself on camera. And then he said, I have boxes of tapes of that. And then I just like, I'm gonna get that. But I was like, this is my film. My film is gonna be about the father and the son. And then I came back and I decided the structure of the film is going to be parallel storytelling, editing, and I would show them at the same time, one patrolling on the streets, one panhandling on the streets, and then little by little reveal that their relationship. My experience when I eventually found the executive producers or other collaborators for Hooligan Sparrow was, since I didn't know anybody, I looked at the films that I admired and the films that I think has similar subject matter, has similar style that I want to achieve, and I looked at the most famous films, the award-winning films. And then I researched, look at IMDb, look at the film's website, who worked on it, who are the producers, who are the executive producers, who are the composers or sound designers. And once I have that list, and then I see, can I find an email address online of theirs? If I can't, do I know anybody who might know them? And then reach out to them in the email. I probably send a lot of emails that other people think is so stupid, like just from nowhere, and lots of my emails got ignored. But then the emails would say, hey, my name is this, and I've been making a film about this, and it's at this stage, and is how long, and why I want to reach out to you because I've seen your work and I admire this, and I see some kind of like this. I think you will be interested in this. I wonder if you might be interested in this subject matter, if you might have time or be interested in taking a look or have a phone call. I have a very specific question for you, and then eventually if somebody responds. And in my case, I wrote to Never Sorry I Will Wei's director because her film is about Ai Weiwei, who is a good friend with Hooligan Sparrow, and she's the first-time filmmaker. She had gone through this and probably experienced a lot of challenges that I experienced. And her film premiered at Sundance, went on winning a lot of awards. So I wrote to her and I said, basically what I just said, and then she didn't get back to me for a long time, and when she eventually did, she said, send me a link, and I sent, and then she didn't watch for a long time, and then eventually when she did, she wrote back an email very excited. She said, wow, your film is great, I was so touched, and let me know how I can help you. And then we